people of God, please be seated and join us for the Passion story. The Passion according to Mark, the 14th and 15th chapters. It was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. The chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him, for they said, "Not during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people." While Jesus was at Bethany, at the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard, and she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, "Why was this ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and the money given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said to them, "Let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for its burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray Jesus to them. When they heard it, they were greatly pleased, and they promised to give him money. So he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, Jesus' disciples came to him and said, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover meal?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he goes, say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." So they went into the city and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, Jesus came with the 12. When they had taken their places at the table and were eating, Jesus said to them, "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me. One who is eating with me." They began to be distressed and to say to him one after another, "Surely not I." But he said to them, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the bowl with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to them and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly, I tell you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day I drink it new in the kingdom of God." When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Jesus said to them, "All of you will become deserters, for it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered.' But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter said to him, "Even though all become deserters, I will not." But Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this day, this very night, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." But he said to him vehemently, even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all of them said the same. Then they went to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, "Sit here while I pray." He took with him Peter and James and John, and he began to be distressed and agitated. He said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." And going a little farther, he threw himself onto the ground and began to pray that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, "Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me. And yet, not what I want, but what you want." And he came and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not keep awake 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you do not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went off to pray, saying the same words, and again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a 3rd time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough! The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." Immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." So when he came, he went up to him at once and said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Jesus said to them, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled." And all of them deserted him and fled. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They caught hold of him, but he left the linen cloth behind and ran off naked. They took Jesus to the high priest. And all the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders were assembled. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now, the chief priests and the scribes were looking for testimony against Jesus, to put him to death. But they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say that I will destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with human hands." But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and said to him, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Then the high priest said again, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said to them, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" And all of them condemned him as deserving death. Some of them began to spit on him, to blindfold him, and to strike him, saying, "Prophesy." The guards also took him over and beat him. While Peter was in the courtyard below, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I do not know or understand what you are talking about." Then he went out into the forecourt, and then the cock crowed. And then the servant girl, on seeing Peter, again began to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. A little while later, the bystanders again began to say to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But Peter began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." At that moment, the cock crowed for a second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders, the scribes, and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "You say so." Then the chief priests began to accuse him of many things. Pilate again asked him, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now, at the festival, Pilate used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now, a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came to Pilate and began to ask him to do for them according to his custom. Pilate answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" For he knew it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. So Pilate asked them, "Then what do you want me to do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him!" Pilate asked them again, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers took Jesus to the courtyard of the palace, which is the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews." And they struck him on the head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. They offered Jesus wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him. And they divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9:00 in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charges against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 bandits, one on his right and the other on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests and the scribes were also mocking him among themselves and saying, He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe. Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3:00 in the afternoon. At 3:00, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Some of the bystanders who heard it said, "Listen, he's calling for Elijah." And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now when the centurion who stood watching saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was God's son." Now there were some women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And there were also many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. Now, when it was evening, and since it was the day of preparation, meaning the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was himself also waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked him for the body of Jesus. When Pilate heard it, he wondered if he were already dead. And so he summoned the centurion and asked him if he had been dead for some time. When he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. And Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, he wrapped it in the linen cloth and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of the rock. Then he rolled a stone in front of the entrance to the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, saw where the body of Jesus was laid.